was leader. So that goes back a ways. I'm going to introduce our panelists in the order of their speaking. So I'm just going to start with Paul Manley, who will be speaking first. And I've known Paul for a long time, and I've known him in many different roles. Paul and I first met when I was a radio host and he was a filmmaker, and he was making waves by covering very controversial but important public issues as a documentary filmmaker. Paul is a small business owner. He's worked in film and television, and really a wide range of topics for his films. I mean, I knew him on international trade when he was certainly making things difficult for the police provocateurs who were covering the World Trade Talks. But he's also done films on food security, First Nations, language revitalization, healthcare, and through his work, he raised public awareness. So it's not a surprise that Paul, who wanted to find ways to continue making a difference, should turn his attention to politics. Between his filmmaking career and politics, he also worked in coordinating employment skills for youth at risk and people with diverse abilities. And I think that really influences how Paul sees guaranteed livable income. I'm proud to say that on the 6th of May in 2019, he became the second elected Green MP. Pretty exciting times for those of us in the Green Party. And then, of course, he had to turn around and less than 6 months later run again, and we're pleased to say win for a second time. In addition to being a strong advocate on environmental issues, he's been calling for a guaranteed livable income for all Canadians, as well as national standards in long-term care. So, Paul Manley, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Joanne. I have been talking about guaranteed livable income for quite a while in the House of Commons. I was just going to try to do a search, and I've just left the virtual parliament, so I didn't get a chance to do that. To see how many times I mentioned guaranteed livable income in the House of Commons, and it's many, many times. So, you know, when I first ran in 2015, it was on the agenda. It was something that when I learned about that Green Party policy, I was really excited about it because I think it makes a ton of sense. And then as we were, you know, entering into the pandemic, it's something that I started to push front and center. I was really the only one, aside from Elizabeth May, that was talking about it before the pandemic. But after, it really became a topic of conversation. And so we could see that people were going to be in trouble financially because of the lockdown coming. And right away, you know, was something I advocated that the government should do, is to have at least an emergency version of the guaranteed livable income, so that everybody had a base level of income, an income floor under which no person could fall. And we saw this patchwork of programs come out for COVID, and people were missing in those programs, and people were falling through the gaps throughout. And so I brought it up multiple times. When you have questions and comments in the House of Commons after somebody else's speech, if it related, I would ask if they'd support a guaranteed livable income. And so I asked the Bloc, I asked the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Liberals. And as that conversation has gone forward, we're seeing much more cross-party interest in this. So there are definitely Liberal MPs that really like this idea. Leah Gazin put forward motion 46 to bring in a guaranteed livable basic income, and I was the second MP to second that motion. And Elizabeth May and Jenica Atwin have seconded that motion as well. And I've brought it up in multiple speeches. I've talked to the ministers about it. I've sent proposals to the ministers about it, and done town halls like this to discuss it. Our proposal for a guaranteed livable income is basically anybody who has a social insurance number would be able to access it. And like I said, it would create an income floor under which no person could fall. Right now, currently, we have a whole bunch of different programs that are available for income supports. And if you go to the Statistics Canada site, you'll see that in 2017, it was $177 billion that was paid out by all levels of government towards some form of income support, whether that was social assistance, old age supplement, guaranteed income supplement, child tax benefits, working income tax benefits for working poor. And that didn't include employment insurance or CPP, which are different things. CPP is something you invest in yourself. Employment insurance is an insurance program that you're paying into. But all of these other things are income replacement programs. In 2013, we paid out $185 billion between the federal government and all the provinces, and that was equal to 1/10 of our gross domestic product. So it's to deal with this effectively, the Parliamentary Budget Office looked at how much it would cost us to have a federal program, but they didn't factor in what it would look like with all of these provincial programs melded in. And of course, we would need to work with the provinces on this and develop a program. It's across the spectrum, though, it creates different interest because on the right, they see it as a way to eliminate some of the bureaucracy because there's a lot of bureaucracy involved with our social safety net. So when you apply for welfare, you got to go see a social worker who sits there and picks through your life and determines whether you're a member of the worthy poor or the unworthy poor. And so there's a lot of bureaucracy involved in, following through with people. There's also an inherent bias with the way that our social safety net works as well. So you're dealing with an individual across a desk who looks at you and makes a judgment call about you. They may have racial bias, they may have gender bias, they may have other bias related to how they deal with you. I've had to collect welfare once in my life. In my first marriage, my wife had a disability, had a very young child. We were in a set of very unfortunate circumstances, and I didn't have work. And we were basically in trouble. I needed to keep a roof over our heads, and I had to go to the welfare office. And at the time, I've been a professional musician for a long time and had very long hair and a beard. And I was judged. I felt like I was just having my life picked apart. It was the most demeaning process I've ever been through. And I was determined afterwards that I would never have to go through that again. But I've worked with a lot of people, with youth with barriers to employment, people with diverse abilities, who have to go through these kind of processes all the time to get the things that they need to survive. And our disability programs, there's a lot of hurdles to get people signed up to disability. We have hurdles in the way for people to get the CPP disability tax credit, and we have companies, there's legislation that's been on the table since 2014 to eliminate these proponents who overcharge for this. I had some constituent in my riding who paid $1,000 to have somebody apply for CPP disability because people have a problem. It's difficult for some people to go through all of this paperwork, and so it eliminates those kind of things. People ask how we would pay for it. Well, it would save a lot of money in our healthcare system. We know that poverty determines our health. We know that poverty also determines people's interaction with the criminal justice system in a lot of ways. And so we would save a lot of money in healthcare. We would save a lot of money in our criminal justice system. It would provide a safety net for people who want to go back to work. Lots of people are losing their jobs because of automation, because of artificial intelligence. And it gives people the opportunity to take a chance to go back to school without worrying about going into extreme poverty to do that. Also, people who want to be involved in becoming entrepreneurs, setting up a business. Huge risks involved with that. But if you have a guaranteed livable income that you were able to fall back on to take those risks, then eventually you're earning more money, you get a better education, you get a good business going, then you're contributing taxes back into the system and helping other people, you know, get a leg up as well. When I think about how you would determine your guaranteed livable income, you know, every month you have your payroll deductions. And so if you get your guaranteed livable income every month, and then your deductions based on your income cut back on that incrementally to the point where, you know, you're earning enough money where you don't need it anymore, then you have a system in place so that if suddenly you lose your job, you're not going and applying for assistance. It's there. It already exists. And so it would cover you in terms of like health issues and stuff like that. Somebody in your family is sick and you need to take time off of work to be able to take care of a loved one. And people do this all the time for their elders or for family members who have been in accidents or disabled or have young children. So it provides a lot of flexibility in people's lives. Other ways we're going to pay for this? Let's start taxing the billionaire class. They've, you know, during this pandemic, they've increased their wealth. I think it was 20 billionaires increased their wealth by $28 billion in the first 6 months of this pandemic. And it just kind of shows you the wealth inequality that we have in this country. And I think that sum has gone up to like 53 billion, and the billionaires around the world have increased their wealth by $2 trillion. We have major multinationals that do business in this country that don't pay taxes here at all. Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, they're all doing business. They're gleaning advertising dollars here, and they're not paying their fair share. There's lots of loopholes that the rich are using to avoid taxes. We just need them to pay their fair share and take care of each other, and then have incentives for people to be going back to work. So you're not giving a guaranteed livable income that allows you to enjoy all the good things in life. It takes care of the, you know, your food, your shelter, your clothing, your basics, and incentivize work by having an incremental clawback rather than what we saw with the CERB, where suddenly you hit $1,000 of income and you lose your $2,000 CERB. That was not a very good program to set up because people were nervous about losing all of their money. So you have an incremental clawback that allows people to earn money and incrementally have that money taxed back through a payroll tax system, or if it's a wealth tax for those people who have dividends or other forms of earning other than payroll, then, you know, it's based on how you go through life and what you're paying, you know, for taxes, and making sure that you're not jumping through a whole lot of loopholes so that you're wealthy and getting the guaranteed livable income, because we don't need that either. Anyway, I'll leave it there and pass it along, and I'm sure there'll be some questions afterwards.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for being such a champion in the House. I can tell anyone, if not everyone maybe spends their time with CPAC as their kind of you know, background sound, but it is wonderful to watch Paul Manley take advantage of every opportunity to get on his feet on the chance that he might have a chance to speak. And when you're a small but mighty group of MPs, those opportunities are vital. And Paul's, I think, you know, if this was baseball, Paul, we'd probably say you had the most stolen bases because you grabbed the most speaking slots. We're going to move on now to our next panelist, who's Jessica Alexander. And Jessica is the deputy leader of the Green Party of Nova Scotia. She's helped to re-energize the Nova Scotia Green Party ever since 2016, holding key roles as a policy convener, official agent, candidate, deputy leader, as I said, and encourager. I think that should be on the list here someplace. She has a degree in public policy studies from Mount St. Vincent and a certificate in sustainable leadership from Dalhousie. She has had numerous volunteer roles, including with the Northwest Planning Board for the Nova Scotia Health Authority, the Canadian Cancer Society's Peer Support Program, and Research Ethics Board for the Nova Scotia Health Authority. She practices restorative justice through the Nova Scotia Department of Justice designated service provider. And again, I think a role that Jessica will bring to her understanding of what a guaranteed livable income looks like. She's worked for several levels of government, both in Nova Scotia and BC. She has studied basic income and has worked to implement various income support programs. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate that. Can you hear me? Okay, so what I was going to do for my talk tonight, I want to talk specifically about how guaranteed livable income looks in Nova Scotia, what it is appearing to cost, and where some of the funds will come from to cover the cost of implementing that. Because in Nova Scotia, we absolutely love to talk about how much things cost. In fact, I don't think we can have a talk about just about anything, whether it's a highway overpass or a bridge or an income support program, without discussing how much it's going to cost, which is different from how much it's worth. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about each of those. So what I'm going to post, I'm going to post a link into the chat. So I hope everybody can see that. My apologies to those who are connecting by phone, because you won't be able to perhaps see the chat or maybe get access to it, but I'd be happy to take direct requests by email or through my Facebook page or my Twitter account and send you these links if you're interested. So what I've posted is the Parliamentary Budgetary Office's costing of guaranteed livable income. I think their title for that program is a little bit different, guaranteed basic income. So us in the Green Party, and maybe I'll speak to that for a moment, we refer to it as a guaranteed livable income. We mean the same thing. When people talk about a guaranteed annual income, a basic income guarantee, we talk about it as being a guaranteed livable income because what it takes to live is different in different parts of the country. Anybody who has tried to buy groceries in the north will tell you there's a vast difference in what it takes to live financially in different parts of the country. So all Greens are asking for is that a basic income guarantee is livable, and that needs to be proven. And so there are regional differences for what is livable. So if you're able to click on that link, great, you can follow along with me. I'm going to show you some numbers here. So we like to use really good evidence in the Green Party of Nova Scotia when we're talking about policy changes. And this is a fabulous document that was produced this year. So it's current, it's relevant, and for all intents and purposes, we can get at least a snapshot of what guaranteed basic income would cost roughly in Nova Scotia. So scroll down if you're with me and go down to summary figure 2, which is on page 3. And you can see the different costs in various provinces. And the one I'd like you to pay attention to is the Nova Scotia cost. Potential fiscal offsets from the cancellation of federal and provincial programs that could be replaced by a guaranteed basic income. So $277 million is going to be an initial savings when we implement basic income. I am saying when because I am a positivist. Scroll down some more, and we're just going to take another quick snapshot on the gross cost. So this is not there's no savings involved, just the fiscal outset. So go down to table 2-2, and this is on page 8. Nova Scotia is third from the bottom, and the total basic GBI cost in millions is $2,220. So that is $2.2 billion on a gross cost to implement basic income. Part of the other reason I wanted to post this link is so that you'll have it open on your laptop and you can check out the various inputs, what the factors are, and how it varies across the country. But I really just kind of want to zoom in my short time on how this affects Nova Scotia. So 2.2 billion is a basic cost. Okay, and then further down at table 2.3, we see the offsets again, 277 million. And then down into the appendixes, scroll down with me if you're with me. If you're not, you're just going to have to listen to my voice and I'll just feel sorry for you. Down in Appendix B, B-1, potential savings of selected tax measures that could be replaced by GBI. And so this is a change in the tax structure that is going to free up funds to be able to afford it. You'll see the Nova Scotia amount there of total selected tax measures that can be replaced by GBI, $977 million. Our gross cost of $2.2 billion has almost been cut in half by offsets that are this is just by moving money around. This is not new money. This is just money that's already there. And I'm going to post another link that I think is relevant. And this is what Nova Scotia budgets for healthcare costs. So if you're able to click that link and open up the website that's there, this is an analysis of the 2020 to 2021 provincial budget. And this is from earlier this year. I've taken it from an external site because the government site talks a whole lot about new money. What was changed from the year before. And what I liked about this is it just gives us a total amount that's spent. So go down to the second paragraph there. Total healthcare budget for the province of Nova Scotia. So we're talking about less than 1 million people. Our total healthcare budget is $4.8 billion annually. So we've established in a snapshot that the cost of implementing some form of the basic income guarantee is going to run this little province about $1 billion a year. So I just want us to have an idea that this is affordable. When we're spending $5 billion a year, we call it a healthcare system that we have. I prefer to think of it as a sick care system because we have a whole lot of healthcare happening and less health actually than in many other parts of the country. So we have some pretty low health indicators in terms of rates of smoking, in terms of people carrying some weight that they would rather maybe not have, and access to healthy food would certainly have an impact on that budgetary line. And so that was where I was hoping to take my language tonight. Just to give people an idea. So now we haven't talked about anything having to do with the criminal justice system. So how does poverty affect that? How does it affect property crime? Many feminists are very much in favor of a guaranteed livable income because it can free women up from relationships they need to get away from. By freeing up financial constraints, people can implement healthier decisions in their life relationally. I always think it's really ironic that in this province you can get really good cancer treatment for free and you cannot get free access to smoking cessation aids, medications or patches or things that people could really use to get off of smoking. And that's madness. That's madness that we'd rather pay for cancer treatment than to help people get off cigarettes. But if you give an income floor, people can put their most basic needs are taken care of, and higher decisions can then be implemented. And for women, this is especially important. It's also really important for women who choose to do caregiving for their families and give liberty to do that. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the comment there. So the other thing I wanted just to think about is in terms of mental wellness for people. They say that money doesn't buy happiness, and I completely agree with that. But if you do some research and read some good economic studies, you will learn that even though money doesn't buy happiness, poverty absolutely buys misery, and that has been shown. So thanks for letting me speak, and thanks for opening my links and following along, and just have an idea that this is money that by and large is already being spent and is just being reallocated and treating people better in the meantime.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks for making it so applicable to the provinces. I think that's the other thing we need to understand about a guaranteed livable income, a basic income, is that we will need cooperation between both the provinces and the federal government, much as we do under healthcare. So it was a really good analogy. One of my favorite quotes when people start talking about basic income, and I suspect many of you are on this call probably have seen Rutger Bregman's TED Talk, but when he talks about poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash. You know, in what both Paul and Jessica have said, I really see that coming through. Our next presenters are going to present as a pair, as a team, and as you can see, they're both in the same frame here. We have Pierre Stevens and Mandy K. Rainingbird. Pierre is a retired faculty member from Dalhousie, where he taught for 37 years in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. And those of us who had trouble with statistics will not hold it against him. He grew up in the Netherlands, where I'm sure he's heard that once or twice, where he benefited from a government-funded post-secondary education system that he says his education would not have been possible without that. He is a director of Basic Income Canada Network and co-founder of Basic Income Guarantee Nova Scotia. And is guided by the belief that every human being has a right to a fair standard of living, and that as a society we do have an obligation to make this possible for all. And with Pierre we have Mandy K. Rainingbird, and she's founder and current chair of Basic Income Nova Scotia, a professor in the School of Communication Sciences and Disorders at Dalhousie, and a speech language pathologist. And in her work and in her personal life, she's witnessed the detrimental impact of poverty. And she has dedicated her life to working for a more just society in which people have the means to meet their basic needs and to live with dignity. Such an important part of this discussion. And so I will turn it over to Pierre and Mandy. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to share my screen. Wait just a second. Hold on.
Does Greg have to do that for you?
No,
Ask if they can see it.
no, they can't actually.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I want to start the slideshow. All right, I think we're okay now. Well, thank you very much for having Pierre and I. I'm Mandy, and this is Pierre, as I'm sure you've figured out. We really appreciate being able to take part in this discussion tonight about a basic income. It's a topic that, of course, is very dear to both of us. I wanted to also thank Paul Manley for having been one of the co-sponsors of lobby days on basic income that occurred recently in October on Parliament Hill virtually, and truly appreciate all of the support that you've given around this topic. Who are we? Well, in our introductions, you heard a little bit about us. Both of us are co-founders of Basic Income Nova Scotia. And Basic Income Nova Scotia is part of a larger cross-Canada coalition of advocacy groups called the Coalition Canada Basic Income, or Revenu de Base. We also are part of the Basic Income Canada Network, BICN, and Pierre is the treasurer of BICN as well. So these are the topics that we want to talk about, and I'm going to start with what's in a name. And a number of people have already discussed the variability in names that are used to refer to a basic income, guaranteed livable income, universal basic income. There are differences in what these various names mean. Universal basic income is referring to applying a basic income to everybody within society, which is not what we advocate for. We advocate for basic income that's very close to the one that has been described previously by Paul. There's a variety of ways that people have conceptualized a basic income. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that range. It goes from a progressive form of a basic income, this one, and that's the one that we advocate for, and that's a basic income which is an essential component of a comprehensive social safety net. So we do not agree with people who advocate for a basic income that would replace huge parts of a social safety net in order to save money. I think that it's really of critical importance when talking about a basic income that we do talk about the basic income we want. And so we at Coalition Canada have defined the basic income we want as a direct payment from government to ensure that everyone has sufficient income to meet their basic needs, participate in society, and live with dignity regardless of work status. As has been said by other speakers, this then provides a floor upon which you can build. We also feel it's critical to identify principles that we embrace in terms of a basic income, and these are our principles. We believe that a basic income must complement social services, as I said previously, be part of a comprehensive safety net, that it be universally accessible, available to everyone who needs it. And that, of course, is consistent with what Paul Manley called the income means testing. It should be unconditional. You don't have to jump through hoops to get it. It should be sufficient to live in dignity and security. That means to us above some reasonable measure of poverty. And it should respect autonomy and be reliably administered. I want to talk now a little bit about why we need a basic income. This has been discussed by other speakers already, but I'm just going to quickly work through a number of reasons for a basic income. One of them is that jobs can be scarce, and in difficult circumstances like COVID, they become even more so, and precarious work is growing. In January 2020, in Nova Scotia, we had an unemployment rate of 7.2%, and that, of course, was much higher in some areas of Nova Scotia than that. And with COVID, that has increased quite dramatically. As well, many people who are employed are underemployed and struggle to meet their basic needs. These are part-time workers, limited term workers, people in the gig economy, like Paul experienced before, minimum wage workers when they have people they need to support, especially. Why else do we need a basic income? Because not all work is paid work. And we need to value all work, volunteer work, like working in soup kitchens, food banks. Hopefully these things aren't going to be needed with a basic income. Working on advocacy work, such as trying to get a basic income in Canada. Unpaid care work is a huge need. Or demand upon people, and yet is unpaid. Why do we need a basic income? Because student debt is too high and tuitions keep rising. The figure on the right-hand side is from Dalhousie University, where I work, and it shows the blue line at the top is the governmental supports for higher education going down, as the red line on the bottom, tuition keeps rising. Why do we need a basic income? Because poverty is high. In Nova Scotia, the child and family poverty rate was identified by Franken-Fisher for CCPA in its most recent report as 24.2%, and that has increased again with COVID. And that varies across the province, with many areas of the province having higher rates than that. Some groups are particularly vulnerable, as you know. For example, recent immigrants, and this is the figure on the right-hand side, or people with disabilities, or single parents, or the highest column on the far right of that is single, unattached people who are 45 to 64 years of age. And we all know that poverty is racialized. So the figure on the left shows how much higher poverty rates in Indigenous communities, First Nations communities, or Inuit or Métis people relative to the general Canadian public. And on the right-hand side, from an article in The Advocate, some horrifying numbers that show how high poverty is for Black Nova Scotians, particularly youth. Why do we need it? Because there's a human and economic cost to poverty, and this has been discussed before. This is a quote from Hugh Siegel, who has been a longtime advocate for a basic income. And he says, poverty is the best predictor of early illness, early hospitalizations, longer hospital stays, and earlier death. It's a reliable predictor of substance abuse, food insecurity, poor education outcomes, and for some, trouble with the law. Why is it necessary? Because social assistance and minimum wages are insufficient. If you look at the red boxes on the in the table on the left-hand side of this screen, you can see at the top, this is relative, it's a couple of years old now, but it hasn't gone up much. You can see the amount of social assistance that a single unemployed person would receive, about $7,500 in Nova Scotia. You next see the market basket measure, which is a measure of poverty, which is 19,348. So you see that what a person is supposed to be living on is far, far below the poverty line. In fact, for this particular individual receiving this $7,500 a year, they're trying to live on 38% of income that would make up the poverty line. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see my calculation of what a person would earn before taxes on the far right of the table if they if they were working full-time on minimum wage. And the boxed item, $19,348, is the market basket measure for a person who is single and only supporting themselves. And that's the only person who may earn an income on minimum wage, full-time work above the poverty line. Anybody who has dependents would not. Why do we need a basic income? Because research shows it's good for people in communities. And there's been a lot of research that's been done. We don't need more pilot studies. We need an implementation. I'm just going to highlight a few of the points that have been found in this research. It radically reduces poverty. It decreases hospital visits by 8.5% in an analysis done by Evelyn Forget of the Manitoba Project. And it has little effect on paid work. Many people think that a basic income would disincentivize work, but it does not. And it stimulates, as others have said, urban and rural economies. So I'm going to pass this over to Pierre now, and he's going to finish our talk.
Okay, everybody, thank you for, I echo Mandy's words. Thank you for having us this evening. I wanted to talk about a basic income, not as a reactive kind of program to deal with all the problems and crises that Mandy has mentioned, but also as a proactive program. And I want to do that by talking about the transition to a greener economy. When we do some social change engineering at a large scale, like shift to a greener economy, we're really fundamentally shifting the way society works. And as a result, there will be always problems with programs like that. There will be winners and losers in those kinds of social engineering endeavors. The losers I refer to here as human collateral. I apologize for the term, but really there are major disruptions in the individuals' lives, in their core personalities are getting attached. Let's just think about a oil rig worker that gets sort of offered employment in a solar panel assembly factory. It's an enormous change, and it goes together with stress-related health issues, mental illnesses, addictions, criminality, unemployment. And what is absolutely essential is that kind of engineering program will have a basic income as an essential component of the plan. Otherwise, say like people will be left behind as collateral. And it's a sentiment that is echoed in the couple of references that I have on the slide. So, but if it is an essential component, it raises the question of, can we afford a basic income? And before I answer that question, I first want to stir up a little bit of dirt around that loaded question of, can we afford a basic income? Because to me, phrasing it that way already has a bias in it. The question to me is it really a valid question if we can afford it? And I mean, there's a number of ways you can think about that. It's a human rights. Do we talk about that certain human rights are affordable and others are not affordable? Was it a valid question, for instance, about healthcare? Do we ask that kind of question if we're dealing with, for instance, let's say a car wreck and we have a number of people injured and they have to be transported to the hospital? Do we ask, can we afford it, or do we just do it? We see policies like Canada Child Benefit, which have on a very relative short time frame have been established and carry, for instance, a budget of $23 billion. And the question has never been, I shouldn't say has not been raised, but it was a very small part. We don't ask the same question, for instance, for other programs, like, for instance, CERB. Now, it was a crisis decision, and we can argue about if it's good or not. I personally think it was good, but CERB was introduced without much of a discussion about affordability. We don't sort of, let's say, spend every year big questions about affordability of defense budgets. And we see, for instance, government decisions like pipeline purchases and so on for corporate welfare that are not discussed. So another question to ask about affordability is it actually a constructive question, or is it a distractor? And I refer to the years and years and years of discussions that are going on in the US about universal health care or Obamacare. Arguing about if it's affordable or not can be more a distractor than anything else. What also is a question is, whose answer does really count? Is it the people living in poverty or the people that have the 1% of our wealth? Maybe a better question is, can we not afford to have it? Now, I want to draw your attention to two numbers. One is for 2011 for Canada. The cost of poverty was $24 billion. So that's a cost that we as a society carry for dealing with the fallouts of poverty. In 2019, for Ontario alone, the cost was $33 billion. So you can imagine what it is for Canada in 2020. What may be a better question than can we afford is what does it cost? And I'm getting now a little bit into what Jessica was already talking about, but I'm going to talk about a Parliamentary Budget Office report that came out before 2020. And it was a 2018 one that costed what a Canada, what the Ontario Basic Income Pilot would cost if we rolled it out over Canada. One reason why I like to look at that one is because it is out of COVID. The 2021 included COVID factors, but it estimated that the cost would be $76 billion. And if we have in-like programs that are already in the Canadian government system, it would reduce to $43 billion. And then, as Jessica pointed out, there are also provincial programs that are already dealing with similar income redistributions that would reduce eventually the total cost of a basic income along the model of the Ontario pilot project to $23 billion. That is less than the Canada child benefit. Other models have looked at slightly different things. The kind of problem with the Parliamentary Budget Office is they cannot go into the realm of policies, tax changes, etc. Some academic models have actually done that, and they've come up with cost-neutral models that include some tax reforms, particularly regarding tax credits. Now, Basic Income Canada has come up with what I call the Cadillac of the policy options, and it actually is progressive structured and also includes tax reforms. So they are, it's listed here on your slide, say how it combines existing resources with changes in the credit system and includes tax increases on the upper marginal tax rates. It also includes changes in the corporate tax rates, etc. The results of that is that we had three policy options. One actually dealt with a universal basic income that did cost something like $680 billion and so on. And we were not really that interested in it. But the option one and option two are basically the same, except that option two includes also old age people. So in other words, the old age allowance and the guaranteed income supplement were rolled into the program. It includes a 40% reduction rate on earned income. And option one would, for instance, cost $134 billion. And it actually, through a simulation program, comes up with tax transfer resources of $136 billion. In other words, it is cost effective. Now, I want to put another perspective on affordability. COVID-19 caused, or is going to cause, 12,000 deaths in Canada in the year 2020. I've just roughly, rounded it off. Now, look at that. And we didn't argue about affordability for the CURB program or the CERB program. Now look at that with what our wonderful inadequate income assistance program manages to come up with. 40,000 premature deaths in Canada each year for the last 40 years. Now this is according to a Stats Canada report. The link is there, you can look at it. But for some reason, we don't even talk about affordability for a basic income. We happily seem to accept 40,000 premature deaths a year. So what I hope that the models that I looked at with you, and I hope that it shows that we can have cost neutral models, and the discussion should shift now, not from can we afford it, but when are we going to do it, how are we going to do it, and what are we going to do. And what we haven't talked about yet is the benefits of these programs. I'll give you an economic example of the Canada Child Benefit. When it was introduced, for every dollar disbursed, there was a $2 increase in GDP. For every dollar disbursed, there was a 55-cent tax return. The whole program costs $23 billion, and it contributes $46 billion to the Canadian economy. It generates 453,000 related jobs. So can you imagine what a basic income would do as a stimulator for the Canadian economy? And that's all that I wanted to say. And thank you all. And we're looking forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you, Mandy and Pierre. That was great. I think we should just send that to the Prime Minister and ask him to get on it right away. Interesting discussion. Now, in our lineup, we have built in a time right now for the panelists to ask each other questions, but it is going to cut into our time for questions from the audience. So I'm just going to ask for Greg to give me a little direction there because we're running a few minutes late. Would you like to have some discussion amongst our panelists, or do you want to go straight to questions? Do you have a thought, Greg? Does the audience want to say?
I think everybody's having a wonderful time, and I would like to see a little bit of a discussion between the panelists. And I will send you. You have about 5 questions for the question period, so it's not. I'm not going to be here for hours.
All right. Well, then let's we've heard now from our panelists, and I did sense some unanimity, but also some questions. So Jessica, you have a question.
I have a question for you, Joanne, and for Paul. I want to know if I understand the Green Party's concept of GLI accurately, that there is, I stated it, I was pretty sure about it, that we have a regional lens on what is livable, and that we apply that when we talk about the label for a basic income guarantee. But I would like confirmation from the experts, which I'm considering Joanne and Paul, who know the Green Party platform and policy inside and out, and I'm a little bit more distant from that. So I would like clarity on that.
You want to start, Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Like our policy is not totally prescriptive on how this would be done. And you know, there's the universal model and there's the universally accessible model. And I think that the key thing is to ensure that we create something that creates an income for that people don't fall below is the main thing. I've had lots of discussions with Basic Income Canada about this and different ideas about you know, how you would set it up. And you know, there are a couple of questions about you know, means testing, but you don't need a means testing system when you have a taxation system that determines how much you're earning. And if you know, like when you're an employee, you fill out those forms at the beginning of your employment that says, this is how much you expect to earn from your job, this is your provincial tax, this is your federal tax. And if you have a system where it's set up that automatically, if you didn't earn any income that month, you would get your GLI, or you would get your top up on your income based on what you're reporting for your earnings every month, then you have a system that's basically run by a computer. So we haven't really done a full prescription on how it would go, and I think that it's getting the idea across and getting people to think about it, and then work on the implementation and get into the weeds then.
Yeah, I'm going to comment on that, Paul, just because I hear some of what's in Jessica's question. The reason we tend not to call it a universal basic income and we call it a livable income in the Green Party has a lot to do with what Paul says and why we're not being so prescriptive, because we're learning a great deal from Basic Income Canada and groups like that about what is that regional equation. And so I think that, yes, there would be regional differences. because it's just true. It's not the same to live in Wolfville as it is to live in Toronto. And you have to reflect that. If you live in Vancouver or you live in Sydney, Cape Breton, the differences are there. And there would be some reflection of that. But we are being cautious about, for example, going with the cost of living market basket, for example, because there are things in that market basket that those who are living right now below a poverty line would not consider part of their basket. So that's where I think we are counting on those who have lived it and are experiencing it to say, how do we make this, yes, accessible, universally accessible? How do we make it regionally equivalent? And how do we ensure that those who need it most are getting the most? So I think that's what we mean. Often when people say UBI, they're just giving everybody the same check. Green Party, and I believe Basic Income Canada, and I'll let Pierre and Mandy comment more, but we think it's a bit more specific than that.
I think it's also specific for, individual needs as well, because you have people who are eligible for disability payments right now who should get more than just their basic needs met. And so then you're talking about a means test and all of those kind of things. And I'm not sure how we would work out all of those finer details, but I think that you do have to take into consideration the regional, personal circumstances and things like that.
Yeah, and as you say, for those who have who file some form of income tax, there's one level where you need to be careful. And in this country, I think personally, it's going to be my big question. It is time to review our tax system. We have not reviewed our tax system since the 1960s. And a lot has changed in our society. A lot has changed. It is time, and I know we hate royal commissions and things like that, but it is time to actually study reforming our tax system dramatically. And that's when you could start to reflect much of what was in, for example, Pierre's explanation to us, so that we have a more equitable tax system. It is less onerous to do it, so that people who are already stressed are not stressed by doing their taxes. So I'm now going to say, who else has a panelist question? One? Yes, go ahead, Mandy.
Okay, so I noticed I noticed in the Green Party's 2019 platform that there was a statement that a basic income would take place through, or implementing a basic income would be negotiated.
I'm like, go to Moppy right now.
Okay, somebody's audio is on and I can't quite hear Mandy. Okay, go ahead, Mandy, finish that.
Okay. Would take place through a negotiation with within the Council of Canadian Governments. My understanding of that is that that provinces, territories, and Indigenous governments and the federal government would negotiate together around this. And would this I guess this is a question for the Green Party representatives. Would this negotiation take place province by province, or would there be some more general discussion that you're envisioning? I know now that PEI, British Columbia, Nunavut, Newfoundland all have committees looking at how they might go about implementing a basic income, and the PEI report just came out and was of course recommending immediate discussion with the federal government. So I'm just interested to hear what people's notions about how that would unfold are.
Well, I'll start and then I'll go to Paul, who'll probably give you a more practical look at it. But it is true, we believe one of the structures that's missing right now, and we're seeing it causing some difficulty in the country under COVID, for example, is we do not have a forum to go to that brings what we would call the Council of Canadian Governments of all orders of government, including First Nation, Inuit, and Métis. So if you don't have that happening on a regular basis, then the federal government kind of decides when they get together, and it can negotiate sometimes two sides against the middle. And that does happen. And you've heard there's been pressure on the Prime Minister right now to call the First
allowed to and show the rest of the country how to do it.
Well, I've always said PEI is the perfect place to do a permanent provincial program because their numbers are so manageable. And if it works, then you figure it out. Let us go now to the questions that have been submitted, and a couple of them overlap. But I'm going to go to this one first because we've had a couple of questions about making sure we don't lose other services, that suddenly everything gets put into GLI. So here's the question. I've heard that GLI can be used by Conservatives to reduce public programs. What can the Green Party do to ensure that no public programs are cut if GLI is to be introduced until the demand is reduced? So that's a question that I would think Paul can answer, but I'd love to hear Pierre and Mandy on that too. So Paula, you can start maybe.
You know, GLI shouldn't replace things like affordable housing programs. I mean, it's really about just giving people personal income to deal with their expenses, but it shouldn't eliminate programs like affordable housing or subsidies for public transit and those kind of things. We need to have those programs in place, and we also need to make sure that those people that can't work because they have disabilities or they're seniors, or that there are still those supplements for them, and that so it's a matter of negotiating. And I know that there is some support for a universal basic income from right-wing organizations like the John Birch Society, because they just see it as a way of eliminating all of the social programs, give everybody a paltry check, and then just say we're done with you. Yeah. And that's not what we're proposing, and that's not what I think should be on the table.
Mandy, Pierre, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I guess I'll start and then I'll let you go. Yeah, I agree completely that it should not. Well, I think in my part of the presentation, I made it pretty clear that what we're advocating for is a basic income that becomes an important, essential component of a comprehensive safety net. I would argue that along with the basic income, we should be improving other aspects of the social safety net, not replacing components. For example, in Nova Scotia, we know that we're desperate in terms of affordable housing, for example, in Halifax area and other areas of the province. Homelessness has increased dramatically, and basic income would help support people and provide them with a decent level of income. But if they have no home, then affordable housing has to be something that's also brought in to help support. Mental health, we know that a basic income will improve mental health and reduce mental health costs, but we also know that we in Nova Scotia have a system that does not provide enough support for people who are struggling with mental health problems, and so we could improve there. We know the healthcare system doesn't have a pharmacare program. We need to have universal pharmacare. So a basic income is money that provides a floor for people and provides them with a decent amount of income to allow them to live respectably, but it does not do everything for them. And a basic income cannot replace the social safety net that exists. Social assistance, sure.
Pierre?
I wanted to sort of look at it actually differently, because maybe there's not really a threat there. But first of all, if we had a basic income, there will most probably be less uptake on other social services that we have. And that is good, because it does free up those social services to do a better job for the people that still need that, and I think that is also urgently needed. But I also think if we had a basic income, I don't think we have to really worry so much about what conservatives might do or might not do, because after all, people have tried to sort of curb pension to old age people, and they didn't get away with it because the popular vote is still important, right? Say without a vote, you don't get to govern. But I also think, if anything, right now, there's much more danger for conservatives to do things, because to qualify for a income assistance, you have to go through 50,000 conditions and rules that anyone can attack at any time. Like, for instance, personal assets, when they come into play or not, if you get income assistance or not. Any political party can attack that. But if you had a basic income, there are none of those little things that they can tinker with to make life miserable to people. So I think a basic income is probably a more safe and a more secure way to go, and has less danger of other parties eroding it than what we have now.
Jessica, so you looked very much on sort of the, not can we afford it, but how do we pay, which I think is an interesting distinction that Pierre has made. What do you think it would mean for other services? And the person who asked one of the other questions along the same lines said, we're still going to need education support for children. We're still going to need to have, people who work in mental health, people who work in special ed, and they're worried that we might lose some of that.
Right, so make sure you're talking about the same thing.
Yes.
I think before we start those discussions, as a former progressive conservative candidate, in the previous decade, I should add, in a life that I don't live any longer, I was married to a corporate finance executive, and I hung out with who I knew, and there was space made for me, and it made sense to me at the time. So I want to say I paid a bit more attention in the last decade to more conservative voices, and there were a surprising number of them in favor of basic income guarantee, including the Fraser Institute for whatever that's worth. And they came out early in favor of it because of the efficiencies that are created. And ironically, and this is a gross way to think about it from where I'm sitting in 2020, but because of it creating local markets. Rather than shipping goods overseas, you have consumers close by that can afford to meet their own needs. They know what they need. If you're an eyeglasses manufacturer, you don't have to look for markets overseas and in developing countries. People nearby know what they need, and they can shop for your product. And so that's a bit of a spin, I think, on what we're talking about here. For me, if I have a project that I'm supporting and advocating for, I take my support where I can find it. And if conservatives are in favor of it, I would look at the outcomes. Yes, be careful that you're not losing things that matter, but be quick to lose the things that don't. Do we need a school breakfast program in every school when every family can afford, hopefully. Now, you may have other slippages, right? There can be health issues, there can be social or family dynamics that you want to be aware of. But if a program is not necessary, don't prop it up because you think, you know, you need the one job, or you need the, you know what I mean? Like be careful to be quick to axe what's not necessary. And I think Pierre just said that as well, is that when the uptake is not there, you should recognize it, measure your outcomes, and reallocate your resources wisely.
It's interesting, Jessica, one of the things you said there, and I think we've seen it with CERB, and I hope some academic does a wonderful study on this, but it is my impression at this point, and we've seen it in some of the initial recovery, that the CERB payment is staying much more in communities than much of the sort of economic recovery that's going to other sources. So it comes back to what we know, and I think it was one of the slides, either Mandy or Pierre's, but was pointing to, if you give this income, or you provide this income to those who are on the ground, they're going to spend it there. You know, they are going to be going to the local store and the local grocery store, and I think that says something about where government wants to put the money that is our money. And it's important that we see it used in a way where it stays in this circular economy. And we talk about that a lot in green circles. We want to create more of this circular economy where our finances and resources stay in our communities. Now, this is something you've all touched.
Can I just add something really quick? Like the whole circular economy, and when you're giving people a lot who are on lower incomes money, obviously they're not offshoring their wealth. It's not like bailing out the banks. I just wanted to say something though about the cost of having people who have mental health issues who are homeless. It ranges from $50,000 to $60,000 a year, depending on the community that you're in, to have a homeless person on the street with mental health issues. And that's in the hospital visits, the paramedics, all of the different costs associated with that. It's way cheaper to provide housing and mental health services to people than it is to have them homeless, because of the emergency services are so expensive. It costs $75,000 to $80,000 to keep somebody in prison every year. Yeah. And we know that poverty is a social determinant for criminal activity, for like getting into starting that. I mean, of course we have sociopaths who are criminally involved, and it's a very small percentage of our population. But right here in my community, I have a homeless camp a block from my office. I watch people go by every day, you know, that are in serious, dire situations, and people are involved in petty criminal activities as a way to survive. Yeah. And so that these social determinants end up costing society far more than if we just took care of people to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, you and I would remember there was a person who was living on the streets of Vancouver and had some addiction issues and some mental health issues, and they ended up calling him the $1 Million Man, because they tracked all the costs to the system over the 10 years that he'd been living on the streets. $1 million. And, you know, the question was raised, could we have used that money better? So two questions here I want to get to, and one is about means testing. And I know we've kind of talked a bit about that, but if there's not means testing, some have said the rich wouldn't get the income. However, that would require some testing and wouldn't eliminate that aspect of government bureaucracy. So, Paul, you've talked about using the income tax system. Is there any other way of ensuring that you don't have to have what some would call a stigmatizing means testing?
Yeah, the income tax system, you know, when you fill out your forms, when you become employed, there's a whole bunch of different check boxes for, you know, children, for disability, for all kinds of different things. And because I've gone through this process with people doing employment skills training for youth with diverse abilities and youth with barriers to employment. And so there is a system for doing that, and it's different than sitting down with somebody in the welfare system that's going, I need to see your bank accounts, and do you own a home, and do you own a car, and we need to make sure that you're completely impoverished before we're going to give you a penny. Like that is, you know, when people are down on their luck, do we need to make them sell all of their assets before we give them anything? Like that's not right, because the bounce back from that is so much more difficult. And we're seeing that, like with my office, the number of calls that we got through my office for people who are falling between the cracks with the CERB and the other programs that were created, those programs shifted, and it was because we were MPs from across the country were talking to the government and saying, these are the people that are missing in these programs, and I'll give you a list. And I would compile lists, and I would get on those calls. We had daily briefings every day, and I would hear Liberals, Conservatives, Bloc, NDP, and Green MPs talking about the situation that their constituents were in, and we still had people falling through the crack after all of those changes are done. And, you know, so when you have people picking through your life to make sure that you're completely broke, but also judging you based on the color of your skin, you know, what kind of tattoos you have, the color of your hair, the length of your hair, the kind of clothes you wear, whatever that is. You're sitting across a desk from somebody who's making judgment calls about you and what you do with your life, whether you deserve to be poor or not. You know, it's the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. And so when you're dealing with a tax system, it's basically looking at how much are you earning, and are you declaring that money properly, whether, you know, when it's coming from dividends and other things. And I know that's where the issue comes, is making sure that those loopholes are shut down and people are actually declaring the wealth that's coming into their bank accounts. That's how you deal with the means testing, right? Is through the income testing.
Well, and it's in the chat here. We've got deserving poor versus undeserving poor, and the answer being no one deserves to be poor, and that is true. And Mandy's saying, you know, make sure you write your MLAs and your MPs. Yes, Paul is here as a living proof that if our elected politicians don't know what's going on, they can't fix it. And they need to know this is something that the public cares about. So that's good. So one big question here is, how do you get the provinces on board? Because if one premier says no, it can be canned nationally. How do we protect ourselves from the notwithstanding clause? And it comes back to what Mandy and Pierre were raising, right? You've got to have a mechanism for getting the provinces on board. Now, I know what ours is. Paul, Mandy, Pierre, did you want to comment on that before we go to Paul on that one? No? Okay, Paul, go ahead.
I would just say that we don't necessarily need to have all the provinces on board. I mean, we can work with one province at a time to build. I mean, Quebec is very difficult to deal with anything, and you just need to listen to the Bloc Québécois members in the House of Commons saying, we just want to check and just leave us alone. Don't tell us how to spend it.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to negotiate one, you know, with the individual provinces, I think.
Yes, Pierre.
Yeah, I also think and I totally agree with Paul, but can you imagine, for instance, that the federal government and EI go together in it?
Yeah.
What is everybody else in Canada going to say when people there are living on $20,000 a year and they are living on $7,000 a year? They're going to scream and yell to their own provincial government.
Yeah.
So
or they're going to move to PEI.
One sheep over the whatever, you know, and everybody will follow.
The foot in the door,
Yeah, no, it's true. We have 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure that everyone gets sort of their last word in. Jessica has said to everyone, we can't really say people have a right to live and then let them lack the necessities to maintain life. It's a good point. And Catherine Everett, no one deserves to be judged when they're brave enough to go and ask for help. Wow, isn't that true? They're already vulnerable as it is, and they deserve to be praised for being brave. Well, I think our panelists have been brave, so I'm going to give them each 30 seconds to give us a last word. We'll start with Pierre and Mandy. Go ahead.
You start, Pierre.
I really think, say like what we should start doing is start talking about the how and what kind of model and how soon and when and so on. Say like anything else, we have to have the big picture. Say like, and then everything will fall in place. And if it doesn't fall in place the first year, it falls in place the second year. We'll get there.
We'll get there. Excellent. Mandy.
Well, I would just like to encourage everybody who is listening to begin to push their MLAs and MPs to understand what a basic income is and to support a basic income and to get behind people like Paul Manley, who is a champion for it. And if we're all clamoring, then something's going to happen.
Jessica.
Yes, I agree to those sentiments exactly. Clamor, fight, and work to implement it here at home. I want to draw a little bit of attention on two international initiatives to implement basic income globally. One of them is called Basic Income Earth. Because of course, if we had a country that had it implemented, we would be a prime destination for just about everybody. And why not? Why wouldn't we be? But income could be redistributed globally. Just saying, as a visionary, I can't not see that. And there's also a charity called Give Directly that studies basic income projects in developing countries at a village level where people are surviving on less than $1 a day. And the basic income payment that people can contribute is about $50 a month. You can support a family. And then it is studied by academics on the ripple effects in the local and surrounding economies. So what happens when you give money to the extremely vulnerable globally? If you had a few bucks, check out Give Directly. And there's a great TED Talk about it as well.
Paul.
Well, I really appreciate taking part in this, and thank you to everybody that joined us. I really appreciate Jessica, going through the PBO and looking at how that looks for Nova Scotia. And Mandy and Pierre, really appreciate your concise presentation. Pierre, one of the things you talked about is we're facing climate change. We're facing other shocks, and we have to be prepared for it. And this is a tool to ensure that people are taken care of, whether it's floods and fires that drive them from their homes because of climate change, or an earthquake here out on the West Coast, whatever it is, to make sure, heaven forbid, another pandemic, that we have a system to take care of people. And I think that having a program in place at PEI would be perfect, because it would get the rest of Canada clamoring for it. And possibly having, maybe what Basic Income Canada should be pushing for is a citizens assembly that sits down with experts, and you get a broad spectrum of people listening and going through some of these weeds and ideas and picking how this would work, and then putting forward a proposal to the federal government. We need to do something, though. We need to move forward. Our system is full of holes, and too many people are getting left behind, and we really need to take care of people.
Yeah. When we worked on a document called Reimagining Our Future, sort of a plan to come out of this pandemic. And one of the things I feel that we've really highlighted to each other in this country is Canadians believe in caring for each other. I think yes, it was an emergency, but we brought in the CERB in a way that no one could argue with, because we believed people needed to be supported. And I think that, as all four of you have said, the time is right. People now realize that we're in a changing society. We're in a changing climate, as Paul points out. We're in a changing economic world. We're in a changing technology is changing our world. Like we're really on the cusp of something. And I think it would be great that a province that has Greens as their official opposition would be the first province to bring in a guaranteed livable income. So I thank you. I mean, I studied this a lot, and I have learned from all three of you, and I really appreciate the tools you've given us, because that's what we need to do, right? We need to pick up those tools now. We need to put them to work. So to the Halifax, the Green Party of Canada's Halifax EDA, thank you for getting us all together. Yes, well done to Greg and the executive. They're here, Colin, thank you, yes, and Sherry Lynn and Bill. Anyway, this is
Thank
good
you
work.
for a great job of moderating, Joanne, as always.
Absolutely.
No, this was wonderful. Thank you all. And let's keep up the fight, right? The time is now. Yeah.
Time is now.
Yes, I am.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for joining the panel this evening. Thank you, Joanne, for moderating. Thank you to Paul. I know it's in the middle of your workday, but you get to go home soon. Thank you very much for your wisdom. I had a lot of fun tonight. I haven't checked in with the Halifax EDA, but I think that we could probably do something like this again. If anyone is interested in hearing any particular questions asked to your local Green Party group, please reach out to us on Instagram at GPC_Halifax, or contact us on Facebook, Halifax Green Party, or fire an email to Joanne or something like that. So we're here, and let's